Uh, there we go. So, welcome everybody to Kind Mind Academy, where we have the world, the globe that shows up each week. And we never know who, and we never know how rich and beautiful the conversation is going to be, but I'm certainly happy to be here. And this week, for those of you who don't know, my name is Kelly Mabel, and I've been running these webinars live for about 8 months now. And each week we have a new experience. And this week is going to be just as rich as all the rest because I'm with the lovely Chana Studley. And Hannah and I had the pleasure of meeting Hannah when I was in London. I was volunteering for the London conference, and this beautiful woman was the first online person, as in direct on duty online, ready, full force to guide the volunteers at the London Convention to their assigned positions and where they were going to be to support the room so that many people could take in this understanding. And so we were a little bit close knit because there was a lot of stuff going on, and people were running to and fro. And so having some connections with her and getting to know her as a person was a really beautiful experience for me. And then behind all of that was this amazing, powerful, and very transformative woman who had gone through some life experiences, some things that were regarding pain and circumstance. And so she has written, I don't know if the third book's close to be finishing, but first book was, yeah, first book was The Myth of Low Self-Esteem. I'm sure we can all recognize some of those experiences. Second is Painless, which is taken flight for people who were understanding and experiencing trauma with pain. And the Underworks book, the book that's still to come, is the backstory. And so, without further ado, I'm hoping to hear the current story and maybe a little experience, strength, hope, and where things are going. So, Hannah, however you want to work this room, we're going to do a little bit of you and then some back and forth, and then everybody sometimes likes to jump in and get involved. So, welcome everybody to the room. To those of you I haven't said personally hello, I'm saying it now, and I'm going to turn it over to Hannah.
Well, thank you, Kelly. It's so nice to be here. And yeah, we met in London, and it's like I can't wait to meet everybody in person again because it was so much fun. Even though I was running around like a headless chicken, with 1,000 people asking, "Where's the bathroom? When's Michael speaking?"
Yeah.
It was a challenge, but it was definitely worth it. And so nice to meet people like yourself and all the other volunteers. So yeah, so thank you for having me and inviting me to be on your wonderful podcast. So I guess I know there's a few people here that know my story and some that don't. So maybe I'll just start from, just give an overview of how I came to be, doing this work. So yeah, you mentioned both my books. Thank you so much. The first book was really, it's so funny now I think about it, that the first book I thought was going to be the only book I'd ever write. I'm not a writer was a thing I had to stop saying after I published the second book. Because people had often said to me, you should write a book, because I had some, Kelly said, some pretty powerful personal experiences. I was actually mugged 3 times. It's bad enough being mugged 1 time, but 3 times. And it was in the early 80s. So PTSD was only just kind of going into DSM, which is like the book that psychiatrists and psychologists use as a reference. And so I was in Manchester in the north of England. And basically I got my treatment was, here's a cup of tea, go home and walk it off. I had a fractured skull, I had a broken neck. I had 3 herniated discs from these three muggings that lasted over a few years. And so mentally and emotionally, I got very, very hurt and damaged by that. I was terrified to leave my house. I knew the world was a dangerous place. I remember every time I went near the front door, my head would start saying things like, last time you left the house, they almost killed you. 2 months ago, you left the house and you almost died. So it was very hard to live with that kind of thinking when I didn't understand what was happening. So I suffered with that for about a good 10 years, from the first attack to when I eventually started getting well. And thank God I found a group of people who were working for a crisis center, and they guided me. And I think the shift really kind of happened for me for getting well was when someone asked me if I was ready to let go of my story. I felt very threatened by that at first, because if I let go of this story, then who am I? You know, but I suddenly saw that I was the girl who'd been mugged 3 times. It'd become my identity. And without that story, maybe you wouldn't like me. Maybe you wouldn't be interested in me. Maybe I wouldn't be interesting enough. You know, so I could see how I was hanging on to it. And with their help, I started to see through it. Now, back then, there were still lots of techniques and methods that we were taught and shown. And then I started becoming a coach. I was a trauma counselor for probably about 25, 30 years. And I would help people with trauma and maybe, you know, eating issues, addictions, abuse, all kinds of things, because alongside this coaching career that I've had, I also had a career in the entertainment business. And I started out working in the theatre in London. Then I started to it went commercials and television and then movies. And I worked in movies for about 20 years doing special effects. And so I'd have this day job where I was working on big films with big movie stars. I actually moved to California to pursue that career. And then in the evenings or in the days when we had time off in between the projects, I would then do coaching and counseling work at, you know, with all kinds of people in all kinds of different crises. So it kind of kept my feet on the ground. You know, I've been dancing with John Travolta and hanging out with Eddie Murphy during the daytime, and then talking to suicidal, you know, maniacs in the evening. It was quite an interesting experience. So that was kind of my life, and I just thought that's the way it'd be for, you know, that's just the way it was going. And in that time, I also had a lot of pain, like Kelly mentioned, that I kind of, you know, work with people with chronic pain. And I had back pain, neck pain, I had IBS, I had skin problems, I had all kinds of issues that kind of came and went. And doctors would always tell me that it was coming from my injuries, because when I tell them that my skull had been fractured, my neck had been broken, and I had 3 herniated discs, they go, well, that's why you're in so much pain. And I'm not a doctor, so it kind of made sense. But then I live in Israel now, I'm in Jerusalem, and I gave up the movie business. I was a teacher for a while, and now I live here. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I came across this new understanding of the mind, what we call the 3 principles. And I was so taken by it that I went to London to do some training. I went to the One Thought Institute in London, which I highly recommend. And I needed to save some money to do the traveling backwards and forwards. And I was feeling okay. So my monthly chiropractic appointment, I thought maybe I could do without that for a while. And I've been going to the chiropractor every month for 25 years because of the pain I've been experiencing. And so I canceled my appointments, and I went off and did this wonderful course. And at the end of the course, I suddenly noticed all my pain had gone away. I remember sitting in my chair at my desk and thinking, that's weird. I feel stronger than I have since I was a teenager. And I was fascinated by this, and I started reading, excuse me, I started reading a lot of pain research and finding out what was currently offered for pain management. And I wanted to see if I could recreate what happened for me in other people. Because if my pain had gone away just from this understanding, then maybe I could help others. So I did 5 case studies. I locally asked for some volunteers and got 5 people who were willing to show up and try out this new thing that I didn't even quite know what it was I was doing. And I did spend 10 hours with each person, basically giving over a very foundational understanding of the 3 principles. And they all started to get a little bit better, some more than others, but everybody had an improvement. Everybody was fascinated by what I was sharing with them. So mixing it with some pain science and this new understanding of psychology, I started understanding more about myself and seeing how my pain went away. And I really think it's because my thinking slowed down. Like, looking back at my life, I think that my mind was going so fast all the time. I was a perfectionist. I was someone who I couldn't just sit there. I had to be doing something. I had to fix things. I had to like be the first one there and the last one to leave. With that kind of thinking that's always supervising, monitoring, judging, very judgy thinking, I learned that it was actually sending danger signals to my brain, which was then sending stress, like fight or flight response to my body. And that's where the pain was coming from, because the injuries had healed a long, long time ago. That's one of the first things I learned, was that all injuries heal. I then learned that all pain is in the brain and all pain is real. So if there's anybody here right now who's experiencing any pain, you're not imagining it. There's no such thing as real pain and imagined pain. It's all tied up in how the brain is receiving messages from our five senses and trying to keep us safe. So people often ask me, how did you go from doing special effects in movies to being a pain coach? Well, pain is like a special effect of the mind. The pain is actually generated by the mind, by the brain. And even if you have a cut or a fracture, it's actually happening like a special effect of the mind. And so the more I started to understand this, the more I saw that I'd actually been torturing myself with my own thinking. My brain got the message that I was in danger. It put pain into my body to stop me from moving, to try and keep me safe. And this became a habit, a 25-year habit of constantly dealing with chronic pain. I was actually paralyzed several times and rushed to the emergency room. It got pretty bad. And I can tell you that I haven't had pain in 6 years now. The IBS has gone away. The skin problems have gone away. I had chronic allergies for 50 years, and that's pretty much gone away. Because once my mind slowed down, everything else started to fix itself. We talk about innate wisdom in this community. Well, our bodies have innate wisdom to heal itself too. And so we call it the mind-body connection. And once you start seeing that it's all connected, it's all this beautiful intelligence that's running the show, running how my heart works, how my digestive system works, everything, that it's connected to my thinking, that we're always feeling our thinking, then that's how I think, for me, everything started to heal and get more easier and more comfortable. And so now it's just really, really about helping other people see that, which is why I wrote the second book, Painless. My books are novels, they're stories, because not everybody's like me who wants to read pain research, right? So I turn them into stories, and that way you can see how the people are doing the suffering, the searching, the getting up, the falling down, the healing, and the thriving. And so that's kind of why I wrote that book. And I actually have ideas for about 4 more books in my head. So there's going to be one about menopause. There's going to be one about maybe addictions and abuse, maybe one about ADHD. There are so many situations where I see people are suffering, and it's usually because of misinformation. And if like Sydney Banks said, if only we could learn not to be afraid of our own experience, that would change the world. And I can see it's changed my world in terms of chronic pain and emotional stuff. I've seen it change other people's worlds in terms of finances, relationships, trauma. So there's so many areas where we can take this understanding and help people, to see through the suffering, to see it's an illusion, and come out the other side and have, wonderful, beautiful lives. So I said to Kelly, I love questions. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we want to take a pause and if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, I'd be so happy to answer.
Yeah. I can open up the room for sure. And I want to begin with one, because my first thought was, okay, you've got clients you're working with, you've gone through this beautiful experience for yourself. You were truly in trauma as well. And so they're like, so what are you saying to me? after, like, maybe they've been with you. I want to know the transition between them being in trauma counseling and then them really seeing their thought for what it is. What do you say? How did you handle that client that says, "Oh no, but it's right here"? I know, because I have my own mother is suffering from severe chronic back pain, along with one of my clients who's been with me for 35 years. So, what would you say? How did you move from that to this for them?
Yeah, it's a great question because, like, when I was doing trauma, like training to be a trauma counselor, there was so much focus on going back into the past, talking about it, analyzing it, and when I was experiencing like terrible PTSD, um, my family doctor noticed that physically I wasn't doing well and sent me to the psychiatrist at the local hospital in Manchester. And it took me about 2 panic attacks just to get there. And I remember sitting across from this woman who wasn't much older than me. And she said, "So tell me what happened." So I thought, okay, I'll tell her what happened. And then she said, "Tell me again." And I thought, "You deaf? Didn't you hear it the first time?" And then she asked me the third time in one session to tell her the whole story again. I'm like, "You stupid cow, did you not hear what I said?" Right? And I think I only went back for one more appointment because it really wasn't worth the panic attacks it took me to get out of the house, navigate the streets and the traffic, navigate finding my way around the hospital to her office, for her to get me to tell it over and over again. I wanted to scream at her, "You know what? I do that really well at home. I do that at home all day long. I do nothing but relive it. Show me how to not do that."
Yeah.
And she didn't know how. She didn't know how.
Mm.
So that was the only professional help I ever took for any kind of therapy I've ever had. I wasn't impressed. I know there's some good psychologists out there, but she wasn't one of them, in my opinion. And so when I started working with people, I was using lots of techniques and methods like I was trained. And then when I came across the principles, that just didn't make sense anymore, to keep going back into the past. So I have one really clear memory of the first time I really worked with a trauma client after I, really got grounded in these ideas. And she came for a first session. She knew nothing about my background or me or anything. And my intuition said, "Don't ask her what happened." And so we spent like an hour, and I just really had a general conversation with her about how experience works, how the mind works, how the role of thought, how thought is always moving. We had this really wonderful conversation, and she left. And I thought, that's interesting. We'll see what happens. She messaged me the next morning and she said, "Thank you so much for not asking me what happened." She said, "Psychologists and therapists have been torturing me." And that was her words. She said, "They've been torturing me for 10 years, making me relive it and relive it and relive it." Now, we carried on and had a few more sessions, and I believe it was a rape. And I think it was somebody she knew or the family knew, which is often the case. And she kind of saw that the suffering that she was going through now was in her thinking about what happened and her judgments of her family and how she thought they should have reacted and how they thought they should be supporting her, and they weren't, in her opinion. And that's where her suffering was coming from. And when she started to see that, she started to get free of what had actually happened. And it's not denial. She was very clear about what happened to her. I'm very clear about what happened to me. But it doesn't exist anymore unless I think about it right now. And so she got free of it. And the funny thing was, a couple of days later, I had another new client, a lady who came and was in a real state, really like bouncing off the walls, she couldn't follow a sentence. It was quite difficult. And so I remember I asked her, I said, what's going on? She said, "Oh, my PTSD is very bad today." And my intuition kind of went the opposite way. And I said, "Really? I'm so sorry. What happened to you?" And she said, well, it's from being single, of course. Now, like You may have just had a snigger. For a split second, I thought, really? Are you really going to compare like being beaten and raped to being single? And then I suddenly realized her thinking was as torturous about being single as a 40-year-old woman as the other woman's thoughts were about being raped or me being beaten. So I suddenly had such compassion for it. Now, I still think it was, we can have an opinion about calling that PTSD, but I suddenly thought that she was as traumatized by her thinking about her situation as someone who's been through what we would traditionally call, a trauma. Because from this understanding, we often talk about separate realities and we're living in the feeling of our thinking. Well, it doesn't actually, this isn't going to sound right. It's not that it doesn't matter what happened to you. I have so much compassion and understanding for people who've been through terrible things. But if we're only ever experiencing our thinking, that's what's traumatizing me, not the event that's now in the past. So that's kind of how I've come to it. And my most recent insight with trauma, for myself at least, is that whenever I would think about the things that happened to me from a low mood, it would always end in tears, in hysterics, in needing to call someone up drunk at 2:00 in the morning and tell them what happened to me. They're like very dramatic. Because from a low mood, it's never going to end well. In fact, Sydney Banks says in Second Chance, one of his wonderful books, he says that to go back into the past from a low mood is psychological suicide. And that sounds very dramatic, but I get that. Like, I have no business looking at my past when I'm in a low mood. But when I'm in a good mood, when I'm in a better level of consciousness, I can look at my past and I can do it with understanding and even compassion for myself who didn't understand, and even for the people who hurt me. And that for me is huge. That's almost like heresy to the traditional way of looking at trauma. But that's my current experience. I can look back into the past and the things that happened to me, and I'm pretty neutral to it. And I even have compassion, and and it all comes from this understanding. So, thanks.
You've hit on too many points for me to even comment on, but I think one of the things that really grabbed me there was that place where, I can recognize a low mood pretty quickly, and anything past knowing that it's just that moment. Like the next moment is going to be something different. And I also connect a low or a place of moving from a low mood for me is movement, because thought is always ever moving. But when I physically move along with that mood, the mood lifts. So I don't know about anybody else, but yeah, that was awesome. So let's open up the room to see who has something to share, add, point to, question. I'm happy for anybody who would like to ask Hannah or just share. I noticed we had some latecomers in the room. Thank you for coming. Go ahead, Mr. Thomas. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Great to be here. I've really enjoyed hearing you. Chana, I'm a bit late, so I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Chana or Hannah?
It's Hannah. You can forget the
Hannah.
Hannah works just fine. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So I'm curious. I practice Qigong quite regularly, a few minutes here and there throughout the day, very relaxing. And in that Chinese philosophy, it talks about how trauma or pain is stored in the body in certain organs, like fear in the liver. Don't quote me on the exact organ, but something like that. So I'd love to hear you kind of talk about that, if you could, and what you feel, how you feel the principles connect to that kind of philosophy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That is such a great question. And and thank you for telling me that it's in that tradition, because I've always believed it came from Freudian understanding. So I would imagine Qigong, or however you say it, is probably around longer than Freud. Um, but I actually don't believe that. And when it's like it's a Pandora's box to start talking about it, because like when I've heard people say, like you said, like some things are, are in different, parts of the body. I mean, I'm being a bit sarcastic now, but I would say to them, like, well, what do you mean? My resentment at my mother is in my kneecap, or my fear of like, heights is in my stomach? Like, what do you mean it's held in the body? Right? So, I'd be a bit, play devil's advocate and ask them, what do you mean? Where is it in my body? Is it in my pancreas? Is it in my lungs? Oh, is that why I have asthma? That kind of thing. And so when I would ask people that question, they would say, no, it doesn't mean that the resentment at your mother is in your adrenal glands. It means that when you that's the feeling is in your body when you remember that traumatic event, or you can feel that sensation. So then I would say to them, like, well, how would you know you're having a sensation? And they would say, well, because you can feel it. And I'd say, how do you know you're feeling it? And eventually, with enough questions, I could get them back to the idea that it's actually thought. Because, in fact, this is how I kind of came to understand pain. Pain in itself has no substance. It's an incredibly mystical thing, actually, pain. And so I remember right back at the beginning of my journey into this understanding, I had a meeting with a three principles teacher called Dr. Mark Howard, a lovely, incredible, generous gentleman. And I remember saying to him, I said, I get it's my thinking, but, because we all have a but at the beginning, right? I said, I get it's my thinking, but what about hormones? Like, get out of that one, right? And he went, He said, no, it's still your thinking. I was like, really? He said, yeah. How would you know your temperature just went up and down unless you had a thought about it? How would you know you feel a sensation in your gut that you're scared to do a presentation, or you're scared of, dogs or something, unless it registered as a thought? So an example I would give of that is, like, let's take hunger. Hunger is a sensation in the body, right? So let's say it's lunchtime, and you're about to think, like, what should I have for lunch? Should I have a sandwich? Should I have a pizza? And let's say you're babysitting, and the 6-year-old kid that you're looking after, and you're about to make you both lunch, falls and breaks his arm, right? And you're like, oh my gosh. And you're like rushing off to the emergency room. You're calling his parents, you're waiting for the doctor to show up. They're getting x-rays done, and now you're waiting for the cast to be put on. And now it's 3:00 in the afternoon, and you guys didn't eat lunch. Well, your stomach is still empty, right? In fact, it got emptier, but you didn't have the sensation anymore because you were distracted by the emergency, by taking care of the kid. So either it's in my consciousness or it's not. And pain, we only experience pain when it comes into consciousness. So I could have memories about my trauma, and in that moment when I think about it, it may feel like it's, in my body, but I would only know that because I'm having a thought about it. Does that kind of help or make sense?
Not only does it make sense, Hannah, you've articulated my philosophy much more eloquently than I could, because we're singing from the same hymn book here. I subscribe to your school of thought exactly. So I wanted to hear your opinion about it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's a great question.
Kelly, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I am thanking you for sharing. Linda, please. That's great to see you. Come on in. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm also really enjoying this. So thanks so much. Can I take you back to that bit where you were talking about, are you ready to let go of your story? That really resonated with me, because I realised when I left the corporate world behind, so much of my personal identity was tied up with the roles that I performed there. And now that I see clients, their identity is so deeply connected to their diagnoses. ADHD seems to feature so much. So when you said you might write a future book about that, I thought, please do, because it becomes all embracing for them. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts on, is it harder to get this message across to some people if they are so strongly identified with something?
My short answer would be no, because I don't think it really, I think it's only as hard as the level of consciousness the person is holding at. So when I was really identified with, I was the girl who was mugged 3 times kind of thing, and it shifted into other things, like, I mean, even right now, it's like, I'm the girl who talks about pain. Has that become my identity? It's kind of funny. And for a long time, like, I worked in Hollywood for a long time, so that was, a big identity. In fact, I remember when I was working on a movie, and I'd say, go out with friends that evening, they'd say to me, "What are you working on?" And I could, like, say, "I'm going off to this location," or "I'm working with that director." But I could often have 2 or 3 months off in between a movie. And if they asked me then, "How was your day?" I'm like, "Well, I watched Oprah." I hated it when people asked me, like, how was my day when I was in between jobs? Because my identity went out. So was my identity my job? Or was it what I did during the day? Or was it me? And I can see now that my level of consciousness, my mood, as it were, depending on where I'm holding with my mood, my need to identify with my job, with my trauma, with my experience, for some people it's their finances, like how many houses they have, or like what terrible, like terrible experiences they've had. I used to joke with people back when I was getting well from my trauma that I was so identified with it that I could compete in a competitive tragedy contest, and I would get a gold medal. I could get a gold medal for England in my competitive tragedy skills. I could blow your tragedy out the water. I was so identified with it. You told me you twisted your ankle, I broke my neck. What are you talking about? So identifying with a job or with trauma, or with life experience, is really made of thinking. We make up so much stuff. In fact, just before when Kelly and I were just chatting, and Celia's still here, she was talking about getting out of the box, and it reminded me of a phrase that I used to hear when one of the things that I did before I came across 3 principles was the Enneagram. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Enneagram. It's like Myers-Briggs. It's like a personality testing system. And in that community, they say, the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box. It gets you out of the box that you're in. And when Celia mentioned boxes, I remembered that phrase, and I thought, but in the 3 principles, there is no box, right? There is no box. My identity, it is what it is today. Tomorrow it might change. And so it's only harder to help someone out of that if they see the box is real. The more I see myself as my job, or as my life experience, or whatever it is that I'm hanging on to, that's really coming from a lower mood. And so in my work with people, the more we're kind of raising our level of awareness, then things like that just tend to fall away. We don't have to work on it. It just falls away, which is one of the amazing blessings of this understanding. We don't have to work on things. They just kind of disappear. And so what I would say is, that phrase, all boats rise with the tide. Like, as someone's consciousness is rising and they start to have insights with maybe the issue they came to you with, other things start to fall away too, because how could I hang on to something from a low mood if I'm feeling better? It just won't make sense anymore. It's just not an issue anymore. there is no box.
Yeah, I really like that. Thank you. I think the ones that I seem to be encountering a fair few of at the moment because of a certain group that I'm involved with. I think because their diagnosis is quite recent, there's a lot of relief and understanding they're getting by being put into a box with that diagnosis. So I think they are perhaps not ready at this stage to have it any other way. They've got to kind of, I've got to help them settle and calm down into that. So that's given me some useful insights. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You just made me think of one other thing I would probably, maybe for yourself, that I found very helpful, is that when I get into conversations with people about concepts, kind of like, like traumas held in the body or ADHD or whatever, they'd say that's a diagnosis, but I'm going to call it a concept. Because there is no test for it and it's kind of made up.
I love that. I love that concept, not a diagnosis.
It's a concept. I've learned to try to avoid conversations about concepts because it's kind of like my brother's bigger than your brother kind of conversation. My concept makes more sense than your concept. What I've learned to do with clients now is point or guide the conversation more to what I see as fact. And obviously they could say, well, that's your truth and this is my truth, whatever. So we would talk more about how, like Kelly was saying, thought moves. Find something that you both agree on. Thought is flowing. It moved on. And point more to those kind of things that you can agree on rather than things that would end up in an argument in a matter of, my concept's better than your concept kind of thing. So I've kind of learned to sidestep those kind of things. I think it's a concept, and it makes no sense to me if you really, look at it closely. But maybe, like you said, when someone's still very close to finding that diagnosis and finding some relief from it, it probably isn't a good idea to challenge it. You just kind of sidestep it, and they will start to, if they have insights their own, it starts to fall away and you don't actually have to do it for them.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
That was really good. I connect with that as well. I often hear people, if they're coming to you, Linda, they're already coming because they want to be there for some reason. And then when Hannah said about her client, where she just sat with them and talked with them and never brought up what they were actually thinking they were there to talk about, that's where the mind shifts from the problem to the unknown and the silence in the solution. Yeah, that's great. I often come up with that as well, so thank you for bringing that question. We have a question in the chat, Hannah. It says, thank you, Sylvie, for sharing. How about little children being heard at 8 days old when they cry? Is there thought? I don't think so. What is the 3P take on this? Take on it.
I'm going to quote George Pransky now and say that's above my pay grade. I have no idea.
Yeah,
I really don't know. I don't even know how to approach that question. But what does come into my mind is when people say, like, what's the 3P take on that? Like, I remember someone saying to me, back at the beginning, what does the 3 principles think about this, whatever the topic is? And I've learned the 3 principles doesn't think anything about any topic. They're principles. They don't have an opinion on anything. It's kind of like saying, what does gravity think about global warming or cheese? It's like when I see now that a lot of the questions I get asked, the premise of the question might be coming from something that is maybe it kind of says more about the question, I think. And so when people say, like, yeah, how can you say there's an intelligence running the universe? What about the Holocaust or babies dying? When we kind of go to extremes like that, then it kind of, there are no answers for that. That's why I like nothing is coming up other than, I think what I found for me is a lot of those kind of questions kind of answer themselves when I've got a deeper understanding of this, that if a baby's crying at 8 days old, then it probably needs feeding or it's diaper changing. That's about as much as I could say, and it's up to the, God willing, the caring parents and adults around it to work that out and take care of it. And we are born with such incredible intelligence and wisdom and innate resilience that we all have it. It's going to be there, and that child will develop its own understanding of that. So that's my 10 cents on that one.
Sylvie, did you want to comment on that? Is she still here? I'm not sure. Let's check. If you do, please feel free to come on and give a response. And if not, that's okay as well. So, who else? What else?
I think, does Gina have her hand up? I see a little hand, or is that my mouse? No, it's my mouse. It was like doing a little hand over Gina's face, but anyway.
Yeah. I think it's great that we were talking about, the concepts, the ideas, the models, the techniques, because I know so many people come from different experiences. They come to the rooms of the three principles in an experience of their own, from a different model, from a different understanding of something else. And what I love about the principles is that it doesn't really matter where you've come from or what you have in your belief system. It's the understanding that seeing that if you're open to seeing something new, there could be something else in it, and we're, I think, Hannah, you might agree, it's not like we're saying you don't have the pain or you don't have this problem. We're completely, understanding that circumstance is going on, and then how we're looking at it, is where we're pointing to. Celia, hello, welcome. Come to one.
Hello. I just have to ask again about the PMS. I don't know how to say it in English, but the thing we have every month.
Oh yeah, PMS. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have had a lot of pain in all my body, and I don't have that anymore. But I still got this PMS every month, and that's difficult when it comes to because I feel it in the whole my body, and I can't put that thinking all that thinking away.
Mm-hmm.
It's something biologic happens to a lot of women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know now that my monthly cycle was a nightmare. I had a boyfriend once who told me I was like a ticking time bomb, and he never knew what was going to set me.
I can't hear you.
Kelly, can you hear me?
I can. Celia, you might be cutting out just a little bit, in and out just a bit. I'm not sure. Why don't we try again? Go ahead, Hannah.
Okay. So I know for me that when I'm in a low mood and I get something physical, it's going to be 100 times worse. And there's plenty of research to show this, that they've done a lot of pain science research that if you're in a low mental health, low mental state, and you have physical pain, you're going to feel it a lot worse than if you're in a better mood. They've done research, things like, if you have a surgery, you're going to recover quicker in a room with a window than you do with a room that doesn't have a window. Or think about stubbing your toe. If you've been home with the flu and you're sick and you're miserable and you stub your toe, it's probably going to hurt like crazy. Whereas if you were running for the door because your friends are coming over for pizza and movie night, you might feel your stubbed toe, but you'd forget about it pretty quickly. So pain, or, and it's not always just like sharp pains. We're talking about physical pain, like menstrual pain, or even hunger or migraines. They're gonna, the way we experience them is going to depend on my state of mind. And so as my state of mind fluctuates, then my experience of the pain is going to change also. So there are times when we have things like, say, like the monthly cycle, or maybe cancer, excuse me, where things, I'm not quite into it. I'm trying to think of things that are there. They're not stress related. There's something that comes, biologically, but how I experience it is still up to me. And I'll just tell you a quick story. I have a Harvard-trained osteopath here locally who sends me clients sometimes, and he sends me the people he doesn't know what to do with. Right? So there was one particular lady who was housebound because of her physical condition, and so he asked me if I'd go visit her, and she lived 10 minutes from me, so it was not a problem. When I walked into her apartment, there was medical equipment everywhere. She had congestive heart failure. She was on a breathing machine, so she had a tracheotomy in her throat. She had bed sores. She had her leg was all bandaged up because the nurses had dropped her, in the hospital the week before. She was miserable. And she spent half an hour telling me her terrible, terrible story, how the doctors get the medication wrong, her son doesn't come to visit, blah, blah, blah. It was on and on. And so then I told her a little bit about the work that I do. And I could see she was not impressed. So I asked her a question. I said, on a day when everything's going wrong, like the doctors get the medication wrong, your helpers are mean to you, your son doesn't show up, I said, what's your pain level like then? And I said, from 0 being nothing, 10 to being the worst. And she said, oh, it's not a 10, it's like a 12 or a 15. I said, okay. I said, what's it like on a day when things go well? Like your helpers are nice to you, your son comes to visit, the doctors are really caring. She said, well, it's kind of like a 5 or a 6, because, clearly her pain's not going to go away completely. And I said to her, wouldn't a 5 or a 6 be better than a 10 or a 12? And for a split second, I could see she got it. She got that her thinking about the pain was making it so much more worse. She actually had a TV in every room, including the bathroom, to shut out the noise in her head. It was that bad. And so I've worked with people with like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and it doesn't always go away. But their relationship to the pain has transformed to the point where it's just not an issue anymore. And the more that happens, the more the volume of the pain gets turned down. So even when we have to deal with things like, stuff that is, we can all get a fever, a cold, cut our finger, things happen, twist an ankle. I had an emergency surgery on my leg a couple of years ago. My experience of the pain was completely different than before, when I would get all up in my head and get very catastrophizing, as therapists would say, and like, what if, and that stress is just going to make it worse. So turning the volume down on the stressful thinking is just one of the many blessings of understanding the principles that has helped my experience of pain completely transform. So I hope that was helpful.
Mm-hmm. I think it was said by Judith Sedgman made a comment not so long ago about some of the training she was doing with people in physical circumstances that were long-term, that they would not be ever resolved in certain ways. And she said she was sent in to teach some of the principles, concept, understanding to these patients. And she said the fastest way she could relate it was to say, it's as if you're walking into an elevator on your office floor every single day, and the music that plays in that elevator in the very first day of the job was really loud. And then after a while, you don't even know there's music playing. It's just in behind the scenes. And so would you agree it's about focus and what we're putting our attention onto? And if that one thought is taking us into a low mood, then there is an opportunity for movement in thought, because we can never hold them down. They're always moving, always moving. So
your analogy reminds me of like someone who lives next to an airport. if you go visit someone who lives next to an airport, it's like, like, how can you live like this? And they're like, what? Like, because they get used to it, right?
Or beautiful mothers with babies. We have a comment in the chat. Sylvie says, I don't want to be a pest, but this is what has held me back from believing that the 3P is a universal law. And Sylvie, you're not a pest. We welcome all questions no matter what. She says, not saying that it does not help a lot for many situations, just doubting that this is universal. Well, what do we want to say to the universal understanding?
I'm not clear what the question is, to be honest.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said, Sylvie, for maybe having a more direct question, if you have one, or how, because she started about talking about children when they were young and they were 8 days old, and maybe there's a more direct way of approaching that comment. The way I see it is, I'm thinking the word grounding is what's coming to me. So when I'm in a grounded place and I feel in a better mood than being in a low mood, what I notice is that the circumstances in front of me are far less large, noisy, crazy, sad, upsetting, because I'm witnessing them from a place of calm possibility. And so I don't know if that helps you, Sylvie, but I do know that wherever I come from, whatever place I'm in, what I'm seeing out my context window, the Kelly Mabel window view, whatever I'm seeing will change based on how I'm feeling. So I'm not sure what you're feeling right now, but that's what comes to mind at this moment, and I hope that helps. So Hannah, what are you thinking?
Me?
Yeah. What are we thinking?
As I was listening to you talk about it, I think this idea that I have to fix and solve every question and every situation, and we need to find answers, was part of, I think, how I got into chronic pain in the first place, because a busy mind was what was keeping that fight or flight response going. And I love what you just said about seeing things from a different point of view, because like another analogy could be like a glass elevator on the side of a tall building. When you get into the elevator on the ground floor, you can see the babies crying and the policeman giving a ticket and the dog peeing in the roses and the garbage, and you see all the street level stuff. But as the glass elevator goes up, like say it's going up the side of the Sears Tower, your perspective starts to change. You start to see, above the cars, above the buildings, above the roofs, and you start to be able to see further. And as you get higher and higher, your whole perspective is now changing. And I went up the Sears Tower one time. We were filming in Chicago, and we got to go up on the maintenance deck that's above the public observation deck. And I can remember feeling the building moving. We were so high up. And we could see, I don't know if we could see the curve of the world, but it was certainly, we could see way, 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 way out to the countryside. And but what was happening on the street was still happening. Down there on Michigan Avenue, there was still, like probably policemen giving tickets and, dogs peeing and babies crying and, stuff was still happening. But from a higher perspective, it's like my point of view is completely changed. And so I just know that, like there was a phrase one of my friends used to use in college. He used to say, think globally, act locally, right? Because I can get all concerned about, recycling bottles and vaccinations and politics, and you could get all involved in all these things, and we get paralyzed by that. Whereas when I'm in a higher state of mind, my perspective is much more open. It's open to possibilities, to listen to other people's opinions, and solutions start coming, and intuition and inspiration start to flow, because they live in a higher state of mind. And from that place, I can then maybe think of a recycling project, or some better way to deal with a community situation. Like I had a very proud moment recently. I was in I joined some kind of wellness group. I was looking for, offering this solution to other people. Has 30,000 people in it. And someone posted a picture of a refrigerator that's on a street for homeless people to have food. It's around the corner from my house. Right? Right? I felt so proud, because I could see the street name and the shops like on the main road by my apartment building. What an amazing concept. It's one thing to put food out, but where I live, it's really hot. Nothing's going to last. So some wonderful person, rather than overthinking it and staying home and talking about the terrible state of the world, had brought a refrigerator, plugged it into a store that agreed, I guess, to pay for the electricity. And people were putting fresh fruits and vegetables in there for homeless people. It's brilliant.
Unbelievable. That's awesome.
Right? So I can overthink things and get paralyzed myself, or I can open up to the universe, to these universal principles, and ideas can come into my head that I would never have thought of before. Solutions, ideas, creativity. It's an amazing thing to be open to. And then things get taken care of in really beautiful ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope, Sylvie, that helps you a little bit, is what I'm going to say first. And I want to say that concept of, we don't necessarily have all the answers. And we don't necessarily need to fix them. That to me just hit me right here. Because oftentimes, when a problem arises, my perfectionism, my personality, my attitude, my everything else wants to just, work it out, figure it out, attack it. And maybe there just isn't no need for an answer at that time, because something else is going to show itself. So thank you. William, please. Welcome. Lovely to have you, Bill.
I'm just thinking when I don't care about something, how I feel. My thoughts are, I don't care. And so when I'm really have a distance from whatever the situation is, if I'm involved in it, when I somehow, my mind is quieter for sure, but I'm not caring in the way that I often do, because this identity that I am, I should, and I don't know, and I'm stupid, and whatever it might be. But the other end of it is that when I actually go right into it, and it's like just being so in the moment, and just whether it's with my breathing, my foot on the floor, the sensation draws me. And it's kind of like when I can surrender to that moment, it's like now I don't have to know, and I don't have to do. I'm just in that moment. So it feels almost like I can do that and just surrender to the moment, which then I'm home free in a sense, or I can zoom way out and I just don't care the same way. So I sometimes feel like I find myself doing either and or both. So I just, and I just love how you talk about, it is like changing the story. And so often I see myself changing one story for a better story. Well, that's okay. Well, maybe there's a better. So I just kind of keep changing those concepts or the story, the thoughts, that gets a better one. If I can even make up something that really feels good, that's good too. But in the moment, wow, I don't have to do any of that. And so I love it that when I'm just so present, and every now and then when that happens, it's like I just surrender, and then I feel home free. I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much. Well, folks, if I do say so myself, there's not a lot of pain I'm experiencing right in this moment. I'm feeling the beauty and the love of collective, calibrative conversations. And all the way from Jerusalem, as Hannah said, we were having a conversation about somebody saying Jerusalem in a very funny way. So I think maybe we'll bring it to a close now if no one else has anything they'd like to share. It seems very painless to do so. But before I do, Hannah, do you have anything that you'd like to share with everybody? First, where they can get a hold of you, places they can find your books, when your next book might be coming out. What do you got for us?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's chanastudley.com. It's spelled CHANASTUDLEY.com. And there I have a lot of information about the work that I do, and a blog as well. I have a Facebook group that has over 2,000 people in it now, which is really exciting because a lot of people are coming there looking for solutions for their pain, and they're finding out about the 3 principles. So I never imagined that would actually happen. So it's a huge privilege to share, to share this idea with people who are suffering. And it's called TMS, Chronic Pain and the 3 Principles. If you message me, I'll send you an invite. So you can find me on Facebook. And my books I have 2 books that they're both on Amazon. The Myth of Low Self-Esteem, which is the one about mostly about trauma. And then this one, Painless, which I have a copy here because I have
I'm waiting on mine. Mine is still in delivery with Amazon.
I actually have several book clubs. I'm doing my 3rd book club on Painless right now. It's actually set up for people in Australia. The time, because people in Australia miss all these really cool things, because of time difference. So I had 2 really successful book clubs in like Northern America and European time, and so I'm doing one right now with people in Australia, which I'm loving. I have 2 other book clubs where a men's woman. I started. Women only show up for these things, so I actually did a men's only book club where we're reading Second Chance, and so it's like a discussion group, and I have a women's group on Second Chance as well, Sydney Banks's books. And I'm currently in the middle of recording an online course because as much as this whole pain thing has been fascinating, and I'm so grateful my pain has gone away, there are other aspects to me, things that I would love to talk about, and other kind of, topics for coaching. Like I said, the topics of the other books that are going to be, hopefully, God willing, coming out. So yeah, there should be a course. I'm hoping it'll be done by the end of the year because editing and technology are quite tricky at times. But I'm getting my head around it, and so it's always exciting having new projects. So yeah, books and online courses are what I'm looking at now, and just I just do general 3 principles coaching as well. It doesn't have to be about pain or trauma. this grounding, getting deeper in this understanding is just such an amazing conversation. I love having that with people.
Mhm.
So so you can contact me through my website if you want that.
Well,
Yeah.
I loved having you, and I'm certainly glad that you came to speak about the topic of pain and the circumstances of thought and how we can recreate our experiences.
Mhm.
And I'm so blessed to see you again because it's been too long. Been too
Yeah.
long. Some details about Kind Mind for the people that are here on a regular basis. We're going to be moving days. So we have 2 days on this particular event, Mondays and Tuesdays, and we're now moving into the fall series, which is Tuesdays at 11 a.m. PDT, which will be 5 p.m. Or 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. for those of you in the UK and Copenhagen, Denmark, Scandinavia. And we're going to be with Anne Debenham. And Anne Debenham works in the prisons and the prison systems. So I look forward to seeing you all next week on a Tuesday. And until then, be kind and be well. And I hope that you have a fabulous week. So thank you for coming. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Hannah. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Mhm.